Hi, this is Angie Dollar, and I wanted to talk about some of my secret space program memories. I don't want to talk about Antarctica and the White Mansion in this because I've recently talked about that on James Rink's channel. So I will start with how I woke up to the programs, to knowing I'm in the programs, and just give some highlights of some things that I've experienced. I don't feel like I can go into everything in one recording because it's just so much. I started having the memories because I had joined a group that Evie Lorgren runs. During that group, I was having to go to the dentist, and I had a lot of anxiety about going to the dentist for some reason, which just didn't make any sense to me. And Evie mentioned people having their memories wiped or being electrocuted, having things happen in chairs that were similar to dental chairs. And I had no idea what the secret space programs were. I had no idea what Monarch was or any of that at the time. This was back in February, and now as I'm making this, it's November. So during this time period, I've had just memories flood back to me. It started while I was in that group. I would have dreams at night, and my dreams were different than they've ever been before. I had a dream where I was in a room fighting someone. I started having names come to me in dreams, like different presidents and different famous people that I think are involved in these programs. So, but let me go to how I opened up some more of my memories. I had someone help me to take me into trance and guide me. I work as a hypnotist and do energy work, so I taught a friend of mine how to hypnotize me and put me into trance, just guide me. I go into trance really easily, but I needed someone to guide me and keep me awake during it because I go so deeply into trance. So I wrote up some questions for her to ask me when I was in trance. And we went from there. When I first started, I didn't really know all of what to ask, but we did several sessions together. And after the first session, I really started to open up to a lot of memories and a lot of things that I knew I wanted some more information about. But my first memory is that as a pretty young child, 5 or 6 years old. And I think that before I was taken into the programs, I was taken aside to be tested for a gifted and talented program. I remember when we were tested for that program, the lady who was testing us was pouring fluid from one container to another over and over. And now that I work as a hypnotist, I see that as very hypnotic. I feel like maybe she was trying to put us into a trance. So I don't really see any other reason of why she would be testing us and asking us about pouring fluid from one container to another. I remember also when I transferred to that school that I would go to school crying in class, and then I decided, okay, I want to be a little more private about this. And then I would go to the bathroom and be crying. But there was no reason for me to be like that. I had already been in school, kindergarten, first grade. And then in second grade was when I went through that testing. So something I feel like happened during that time period. And that was about the age that I remember going into the programs and going to an underground facility. When I went to the underground facility, I remember there being reptilians there. What confused me a little bit about the reptilians is they didn't look the way I thought reptilians would look, except when I looked at the picture in James Rink's book, the reptilians have kind of a longer snout, and that's how they looked. And I hadn't seen pictures like that before then. So the first thing I saw down there were to the left in my vision was reptilians doing something with children on a table. And there was some electrocution going on. There was some like mind wiping going on. I saw children being tested for their abilities to see if they have like psychic abilities or what kind of abilities that they had. And I saw children being taken off and put into these different categories based on their abilities. I just heard the word categories down there. And the children that didn't seem to have a certain ability that they were looking for, I saw them being taken and used for that certain thing. It starts with an A. I don't want to say it and have the video tagged to be removed. So they were being taken for that stuff that starts with an A that some people like to drink or use in rituals. I also saw that sometimes those children are not tortured and killed. Sometimes they were just kept alive and they were taking that from them over and over. Let's see, another vision that I saw was myself later on being trained as a super soldier. I was taken up to the moon, processed and trained. But an interesting thing is that I feel like I was in at least 220 and backs. There was a point here on Earth where I was actually joined the military. I've been in the Army, and I have this big military family background. My dad was in the military, my brother, myself, my uncle, and probably a few more I don't even know about because my parents were old enough to be my grandparents. So I've just got a lot of family members I wasn't in close contact with. I remember I had a vision. I was feeling very uncomfortable when I first joined the military. It was a really strange feeling when I first signed the papers and everything. And I remember my dad, I didn't even tell my dad until I signed the papers, which is weird. I don't know why I would do that because I was really close to my dad here on Earth. And he told me he was just like angry. And I don't remember him ever being angry at me. And my whole life, he was a very calm person. And my mom was the handler. My mom was the abusive one, but my dad was always really calm and quiet. But I remember him seeming angry at me. And he said, "Why did you join the military?" He said, he told me that he hated it and he couldn't do his 30 years, even though through most of it, he was Army National Guard. He said he still couldn't do 30 years. He hated it so much. And like, I had never heard about that from him before then. I had never heard that he hated it so much. So I don't know really what was going on. Just going off for the weekend once a month that he hated so much. But I do know he was old enough to be my grandfather. And he was in World War II. He was in Korea. So I know that he saw some things that were disturbing just based on the few stories that he told me. I think that sometimes when people have this military line in their family, they could be more likely to be taken into the programs. So I want to go back to when I first joined, and I was saying I felt uncomfortable. Like as soon as I signed the papers and they're swearing us in, I remember that day, and I was only 18 years old. But I had a vision where I think I was taken during that time, and I was taken back. So I feel like I was taken as a young child. I did a bunch of things in the secret space program. I was aged regressed back to that age of about 6 years old. But I feel like I was taken again when I was 18. So I wasn't gone for like a 20 and back for the first time. I was gone for like 12 years or so. But when I was taken in the military, when I first signed in, I think it's when I was taken again, because I had a vision that keeps coming to me where someone who I think was a general and maybe a 2-star general, I can't remember, I can't get a clear vision on it, on that, but he took me off to the side and took me into a room, and then I was put into a container, and I didn't know what was happening at the time. It's like it had to happen before I knew what was going on. I was put into a container and fluid came up around me. And when the fluid got up like around to this area here before my head, I realized that I'm like, oh, I'm being put like in stasis, like I'm being put aside, and so that they could clone my body. So they're putting my body, my original body aside to clone it. And that was interesting how that happened, where I just didn't know I was cloned. I didn't like realize, oh, I've been put aside in containers like that. I actually felt it. I actually felt like being told, get in this container, and the fluid coming up. And then I realized, like, wow, this is before they're going to take part of my consciousness and clone me. So I thought that was interesting. It's disturbing to even talk about it right now. It's just so strange. It was such a vivid memory. I know I've been taken up to the moon, and like I said in the beginning, I can't go through everything here in about an hour. It's just so much. But I know I've been taken up to the moon, and I know I've been trained, and I've been checked to see what my abilities are, what my psychic abilities are, and I've been trained in knives, and I've been trained in as an assassin, just a regular assassin, I would call it, and then also as a honeypot assassin, like close contact with things like a knife. A silencer, I'm actually seeing a silencer right now in front of me, a gun with a silencer. Been trained in guns, handguns, rifles, mostly handguns, pistols, so it would be something I could easily hide it on my body, or easily put it in a bag instead of a big rifle. I've seen visions of myself with bombs, and the thing about what I've been trained to use in these programs is interesting, because here on Earth, when I was in the military in basic training, I had to qualify with an M16, and I had gone out shooting one time before that, only one time with my dad and with one of my dad's friends, and I enjoyed it. So when I went in the military, I just immediately took to that, shooting a rifle, and I enjoyed it. I did really well on it. I qualified expert. There were only 2 of us in my group, which I think was like 200. I think it was about 200 young women who qualified as expert. During the practice shots, I remember clearly during the practice shots that day, I shot 10 out of 10, and then we went on. I think we had 40 more shots to do after that. So, which I didn't get all of them right, for those next 40 or so, but I still qualified as expert. I remember that first 10, the 10 practice rounds, it was like, wow, I got them all. This is like wild. So I think it's interesting how things bleed over and into this lifetime. I heard someone else talking about it. I think her name is Elena, that Elena, that James Rink, he interviewed her like a while back, like 5 or 7 years ago, and she talked about things bleeding over into this lifetime from the programs. Because I think she said that she there was something she was doing, archery practice or something that she just knew how to do. So in this lifetime, I really liked guns my whole life. I mean, on and off, I would go target practice. It's like I have this natural high after doing it. I enjoy that. When I was a child, I would practice knife throwing and taking karate. I was really big with nunchucks. So I feel like all of those things bled over from the programs. Besides the training with weapons, I know I've trained in hand-to-hand combat, and I know that I've been a pilot in the programs. I know that here on Earth, when I was 16, I was still in high school, but you can get your private pilot's license at 16. When I was 16, I started taking pilot lessons to get my private pilot's license for a Cessna. So I think that's something that also bled over from the programs, because there's really no reason I would be, interested in flying. I had flown, before I was 16, I had flown on an airplane a few times, but there's no one in my family who's a pilot or who was interested in it, except my dad did have a private pilot's license as well. So moving up from the moon, I'll go ahead and go into something on Mars. On Mars, I have a memory of fighting with some large creatures. I've heard a couple other people talk about these creatures as well. They're like spider-looking beings. And the way I would describe them is that they seem to have these long rectangular faces that are curved at the corners, and they do have like the 8 eyes coming down, larger than what we were, but I believe we were in clone bodies, so we were pretty large as well. I remember myself being in like a large male body. I remember when I got that memory, I actually got that memory when I was hypnotized in trance, and so I was able to experience what that was like as a soldier, but then I'll call myself a soldier like in the programs, but also to experience what that was like when I was out of my body, because I saw myself dying in that situation. And when I saw myself die, like when they were all clearing out, like a lot of them were killed as well, but some of them lived, and they left. Those spider beings left, the last few that were left, when they saw the ship come down. So there was a small shuttle that came down to pick us up, to pick up our bodies. And when the small shuttle came down, what I saw was they came over and collected our consciousness out of our bodies first. And what I got from that was that they were collecting our consciousness and putting it into some sort of little container, because there was this way that they did it, that if they didn't have time to load the bodies on the ship, at least they could get our consciousness back on the ship. So they were taking our consciousness from the bodies first, and then if they had time, they were picking up the bodies, our clone bodies, and because our consciousness was more valuable, because they thought, well, if we don't have time to we may not have time to pick up the bodies before some more spider beings come out and attack again. And that group that would come down on the shuttle, they weren't super soldiers. They were there with their task of just doing that job, collecting bodies, collecting consciousness. So they weren't as prepared as us. Now, when I died, what I saw was that I think this spider being that also died was talking to me. So it's like I was in hypnosis talking to the spider being when we both had passed away. Like there I am. It's like my high self was talking to his high self or something. So he was asking me, he was telling me why we were fighting, or why they were fighting us. He said, this is our home, and you're coming here fighting us, and you're killing us, you're killing our families, you're killing our children, and this is our home. You're killing us when all you want to do is conquer this area. And I think I said something to him like, well, I'm just doing what I'm told, So, and I thought that was a pretty interesting scene to see with the spider being. I've been to some other places as well. I've been to Monarch, and I know that what a lot of people say is that there's just boys on Monarch, but I know I've been down in Monarch. It's very difficult to me to think about being in a small place, and I'm sure that has to do with places like Monarch. I know that there was I had an opportunity to go do some caving in Texas, and it was like extreme caving. They had two different things you could do. You could either go be with a group and do the regular, just walk through the caves. But there was another opportunity there to do extreme caving where you're just rappelling down, a long way. Don't know where the bottom is, I guess. And part of it, the thing that scared me about it was there was a description that said you could be in some very small places. And I thought, no way, I'm not doing that. Like, I'm not afraid of heights. I would be fine with that part of it. But the part of you could be in a small place, I just thought, no way. I could never see myself like crawling through a small cave area or going in, for instance, getting an MRI. I had to get an MRI one time, and I just couldn't stand it. And it wasn't even a fully enclosed MRI. It was just a partially open one. So I had to leave and get some Valium, I think is what the doctor gave me, so I could do it. And even the people at the place where I was getting the MRI, they said, well, it's not enclosed, it's partially open. People generally don't need medication to relax them. And I said, no, I can't do this. This is like, no way. So I'm sure that kind of thing is because of Monarch. Just to briefly say a couple of other things I've seen myself doing. I've also seen myself in a place near Jupiter and Saturn. I heard someone talking about this, but I saw myself doing something different. When I heard someone talking about it, I wanted to look at it. What I saw myself doing there, I saw myself as a scientist, and the person that was guiding me in the trance, I saw her there. So she was like someone that I was taking some DNA from. And I was taking the DNA because we were wanting to make clones, or we were wanting to grow the DNA, make hybrids. We were doing something with it, with the DNA. I want to talk a little bit about hybrids, since I just mentioned hybrids. I know that I'm a hybrid, and I think when I first determined that, I just felt like, this is crazy. Like, all of this stuff sounds crazy. It's like, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go? I've had several hypnosis sessions done on myself since I do this kind of work, because the thing is, at first I was just interested in hypnosis, and I wanted to be hypnotized and I do that for a living. But then it got to where I would have people who are good hypnotists who would want to trade with me. And it's like, well, it's free and I get to trade and I can do it as much as I want. So I went in to see a hypnotist in person in Houston who does QHHT. And I saw her 2 or 3 times before she wanted to just trade. But I went in to see her like the second time I saw her, and she called me an ET. She said, oh, great, an ET is here. I love it when a few times an ET walks in. And I thought, why is she calling me an ET? Like, this is strange. And then she talked to me. She said, well, you're part Arcturian or whatever. And I really didn't get it until we started talking, and I already knew her. I'd already done like a session or 2 with her. And I said, I just feel so unhappy here. Like, I'm so alone, even though I have friends, I have some family. I'm just alone. And she said, yeah, of course you feel alone. You aren't at home. And I just like immediately start crying, just like bawling, crying. And it just hit me so hard that I'm just so much not really a part of this earth. And I think that's part of why we're captured into these programs as well. It's because we have a certain DNA that they like. And so couple that with those of us who have the military background and the ET DNA, then they may really focus on getting us into the programs. I haven't looked closely at what my ET, my hybrid components are. I do plan to look at that soon. I'll have to just kind of take some time to go into trance and look at it. I know that there were a couple of, I may have some Arturian like this, that hypnotist thinks, but I know that there are some parts that I have that are not as common. I was watching Barbara Lamb. I've had 2 sessions with Barbara Lamb, and that's why I wanted to assist Rob with interviewing her on his channel, Typical Skeptic. I wanted to help interview her because I know her and I've had 2 sessions with her. But she had someone come in, or a couple of people come in, who actually drew these ETs that I had seen in a vision, and they're not common ones. They're not like Arcturian, Palladians, those tall whites, the grays, the reptilians. They're not common like that you would see pictures of online. So she had a whole bunch of pictures that she showed in a couple of videos that I saw online. And 2 of those beings I had actually seen in a vision as being like part of my family. And I'll have to find those and I'll put those together and figure out all of my hybrid parts. But I know that, like I said, a couple of them are not as common. I also know that I have hybrid children, and I brought that up in Evie's group as well. I said, where are my children? I know I've had hybrid children taken. So either eggs taken or embryos taken. So probably both. So that can be kind of disturbing. It's like, I didn't really think about it before. I kind of had a knowing of it before I was in that group that Evie runs back in February. But in February, it was really hitting me harder, where I felt kind of like, I didn't agree to this, but, did I agree to this? It's kind of a thing of how much of this did we actually agree to. So anyway, I think that might be all that I talk about today. Like I said, I didn't want to get into the White Mansion or Antarctica because I've talked about that recently on James Ring's channel. And there's so much more I could say. And I still have memories and things coming back to me. I've just had hours and hours of stuff that I have reported. But thank you for listening. Bye.